If Hellish Court was real, which character or weapon would win in a one-on-one fight?
Oh, now you know that's a hilariously unfair question. So you want the honest answer or the snarky answer?
I want the honest answer.
All right. So there's no such thing as a weapon winning a fight.
Okay.
A weapon is a tool that dictates your choice of techniques in order to win a fight.
Yeah.
So if I come at you with a longsword, I'm going to come at you differently than I would come at you with a fokosh, differently than I would come at you with one kind of saber, differently than with another kind of saber.
Yeah.
Each style of movement, each weapon has a different set of choices, and there's a lot of relatively even balance in the weapons that are demonstrated. So the honest answer is the guy with the spear. Well, we don't have a guy with a spear in Hellish Court, and for damn good reason. Because make his or her skill equal to everybody else's skill in the game, and the guy with the spear is going to win. No one wants to hear that answer. It's not fun. The snarky answer, of course, is the Fokosh over Lashka is just awesome. Rapier has a hell of an advantage because it can bully the longsword. The longsword says, yay, I can do these fancy techniques, and the rapier says, not if I bind my strong to your weak and have a basket, so your turning strikes and everything else are worthless. And the rapier and the longsword person starts crying in their beer. So that's not good. Then you have the saber guy who's up against a rapier, now has a 6-inch reach disadvantage, and oh, by the way, in this period, the rapier person is able to hit you from a full 3 feet further away than anybody else does because they're the only one at this period who have the Italian at lunge. Oops. Trust and believe that makes a difference too, right? Now, there are springing passing steps that some people argue are equivalent to a fencing flesh, and there is justification more and justification less depending on who's making the argument and how well they're saying it. But the rapier can hit you from a very long way away. And if you're not very, very careful with your techniques, when you go to block their thrust, they're going to thank you by pulling their point behind your blade and then stapling your arm to your hip. And that's a bad day for you. Rapier was widespread for a big reason. Now, if you're not on a carefully prepared dueling field and you're on horseback or you're in a crowd of people, all of a sudden the saber starts coming into its own. Because reach becomes progressively less important and fluidity becomes more important. In a one-on-one duel, I would very often give the advantage to the rapier. In fact, saber fencers I talk to on the regular talk about rapier as if you can hold your own against a skilled rapierist, you are doing really, really well. It's got the reach advantage. Now put me in a group of 50 reenactors and that rapierist is meat unless they can find some way to buy distance. As soon as they're bound, they stand no chance because they cannot use their footwork to establish the range they need to survive. The saber can do that. The saber can hit at long range, medium range, or no range because it's curved. So if you go to grapple me, all I have to do is hold the saber close to my body and turn my waist, and guess who's gotten cut? The dude who's tried to wrestle. So if you have a longsworder who's accustomed to fighting both weapons and knows how to simply break the rapier blade, because see also pre-modern metallurgy, okay, that might give them an advantage. You can see where I'm going here, right? I'm not going to make any of the particular weapon fanboys thrilled with me right now. Especially because at any given day, on any Tuesday, any fighter can beat any other fighter, and you do wind up with weird paper, scissors, rock matchups. An example from the lightsaber guys, because there's a league and we have the stats. There are people who I can't beat. There are people who beat the guy that I can't beat regularly. There is a guy that almost everybody in the league is just terrified of, who I put away almost in my sleep every time. Because the way people move and the way people conceptualize the fight does lead to these sorts of paper, scissors, rock matchups. And that's not something we tend to give a lot of credit to. And point blank, now you have somebody who's got all the training and a really nice weapon, and they're decked out head to foot in armor. That guy's terrifying because he can initiate a grapple and you can't cut him. And if he lays his hands on you, the fact that he's wearing 60 pounds of armor means he automatically has the advantage at close quarters. And he can hit you with his armor. His shoulder is a life-ending deadly weapon. His forearm will snap your elbow easily. His armored shins or his armored thighs or his armored waist are perfectly capable of doing you egregious harm if he can get his hands on you. You can take a blow at him, and so long as he can move enough to take that blow on an armor piece rather than a vulnerable spot, he can simply ignore your blow while smacking you in the face with a saber. There's a reason that guy's the boss at the end, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So the guy with the weapon and the training and the armor, yeah, that guy wins. We have plenty of historical accounts of people who were skilled in armor making an absolute abattoir of highly motivated people trying to take them down. Middle French poetry. Against armored men prepared to fight, the unarmed, by which they mean unarmored, the unarmed have but little might. Because you have to make every defense perfectly, and all I have to do is get a vambrace between your saber and my body. It's a no-brainer who wins that if the skill levels are equal.
One of the characters that's been there for a while, who has armor, that you can't select, is the guy with the helmet. Have you seen him before?
Yes, I have. And I suspect one of the reasons that they haven't really gone live yet is you got to balance them, because otherwise it turns into not the greatest game. So you've got to figure out, okay, how slow is this guy going to be in the armor and how much of a difference is it going to make? So yeah, that's going to be really hard for the devs to balance outright, because otherwise having those areas that are completely immune to being struck turns into an I win button really fast. Same reason Alexander, as far as I know, his basic meta was pulled off of Damon Stith's work, and he has some high-low game. And that high-low game is actually significantly lower impact than the high-low game is in real life. If you can go from full height to butt touching the ground instantly, you have an incredibly dangerous high-low game that Hellish Court can't represent, for the same reason as the Fokosh can't be represented 100%, the longsword can't be represented again, because see also, once again, you would have to break this into 100 rule sets with an incredibly steep learning curve. And that is what I think the proponents of the realism argue miss, is it's not about realism, it's about making a game people can actually enjoy playing. And frankly, if after teaching 5 fencing classes a week, I'm too exhausted to finish a half hour of play in Hellish Court because it's using the exact same fencing muscle parts of my brain that I'm teaching all week, that realism matters to me a hell of a lot more than weapon dynamics and weapon realism that a lot of folks may be arguing over. And I've never seen any other fighting game get that right. Hellish Court has done something that no one else has even remotely managed.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. About strategy and setting up attacks and feinting. I would think that's more important than weapon dynamics when it comes to actually learning how to fight.
Absolutely. Every character has their range and their distance and has to figure out how to keep to their distance without giving the opponent's distance. And then you have to figure out how much ground do you want to yield to make a successful block? How much do you want to exhaust yourself? Because if you engage in too much useless effort, it's not going to help you. You don't want to spend too much time blocking, because then they get up to their range and you're stuck. All of those things that go into good fencing, as the old saw goes, footwork wins fights, right? Hellish Court does an absolutely gorgeous job representing that.
Well, that leads me into a question from one of our listeners. His name is Warden. His question is,
hey, Warden.
His question is, well, he has 2 questions. What is the correct mindset entering a duel? And what is the most important factor in a fight?
The most important thing getting into a duel I'm assuming he's talking about a one-on-one sports fight, because if it's a real duel, the most important thing is making sure that your seconds have done their job. Because you don't want that duel to be a case of legally sanctioned murder. And if your second screws up and the conditions are wrong, that's what it turns into and you're done. So if it's a one-on-one fight, actually it's the same thing for both questions. It's get the hell out of your own way. The vast majority of people don't fight for fun. They don't condition enough. They don't practice their fundamentals enough. And guess what? People got called into duels who didn't have all that behind them. You have to figure out a game plan, have your coach or advisor or second say, okay, try this. And then you try that without trying to stress yourself to death. It's not an accident that I recently had a YouTube video talking about anxious fencers. Time and time and time again, I've had fighters who I knew were technically capable of being incredibly good fencers, who never showed that in local tournaments at all, until one day they were just beside themselves and said, oh, screw it, I'm just going to have fun. And all of a sudden they got dangerous. So if you're playing the game with the sword, play the game with the sword. Get out of your forebrain. Stop worrying about what your girlfriend said last night. Be in that moment doing your thing. The conditions of the duel or the tournament will tell you whether footwork is more important or less important, whether some other dynamic is more important or less important. Am I fighting in a 2-meter wide circle? Footwork is much less important there. Am I fighting on a strip or a large open space? Footwork is determinatively important there. Because if I don't have it, my opponent will be in their distance and I will be out of mine, and I'm decidedly dead. So getting out of your own way is the number one job. Job 2 is pay attention to the conditions of the duel, because they'll dictate the rest. Why does modern fencing use the lunge and the footwork it does? Because they assume a smooth, even surface. So go back in the game. How many times are you fighting on a smooth, even surface? A bunch. How many times are you fighting on sand or rock or mud? Oh, also a bunch. And that changes things a lot.
Thanks for watching this exclusive Quest TV interview.